Great. Okay. All right. Call this meeting the Budget Finance Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll call?
Yes. Miss Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Mr. Constant is traveling and is excused.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
And Ms. Zolotel.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, so we're going to start going through our agenda here. We're going to start with a report from the Budget Advisory Commission. My understanding is that the chair, Ms. Hobson, could not be here today, but we're joined by Ms. Brawley. Anna, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I'll just give a brief update. So we met on December 2nd for our regular meeting. That was our last meeting of this calendar year. We heard a presentation from the administration, and thanks to Municipal Manager Dabowski for joining and speaking to the rationale for the budget vetoes. The timing was such that it was after that had happened and before the meeting last Friday. So we really appreciated that. And members shared back, some of the challenges we had. I know Chair Hobson shared in the past about having participation from the administration. It was also when there was a transition at OMB. So that really, made it more difficult for us as the advisory commission to really get a good picture of the budget. So we just requested that the administration make that a priority for next year. We also heard from the school district, and for our January meeting, we requested information but didn't hear a presentation yet on the bond ratings and all of that, and also understood that there was a work session a couple weeks ago about that. And then we started talking about our priorities for 2022. So we will be hearing a presentation on the limited road service areas. And we're also going to be resuming something that the BAC has done in the past, which is connecting with department heads and just kind of understanding in a little more detail on an individual level, what the components of their budget are, what the main things they are looking at, and just kind of getting a better understanding of how the municipality works. So that's some of our planned activities for 2022. And I think that's it.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Brawley about the Budget Advisory Commission? Let me look in the chat here. Oh, I want to note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Perez-Verdia and by Ms. LaFrance, who is here but is not able to unmute at the moment. Okay, well, I don't see any questions, so thank you for your presentation, Ms. Brawley, and as always, thank you very much for the hard volunteer work of the Budget Advisory Commission. I know it's very much appreciated. Okay, so moving on to item 3B, MOA financial status with the CFO, Mr. Frisk, and then also monthly revenue report from Dan Moore at Treasury. Travis, do you want to start, or do you want to turn it right over to Mr. Moore?
This is Dan Moore and Travis. I'm in the room with Travis here.
Oh, great.
Yep. So thanks for the opportunity. I did provide the revenue report. I think it was yesterday morning. So not a whole lot has changed. And so I guess what I ask is just, I'm presuming everyone's looked at it. Are there any questions about it? Because I'd be pretty repetitive if I went through it, similar to last month without much change.
So I don't think you can presume that all of us looked at it. We had a very busy week with the special meeting that went late into the night on Tuesday. But it is posted on our website, looking at there. If members of the public want to go to Budget and Finance Committee, the whole on the Assembly website, there's revenue summary highlights for December 16th. Is there anything that sort of jumps out where there is a significant variance?
dividend?
I would say the cash pool would be one area that was $300,000 worse off from the prior month. So now it's projected to be $3.3 million under budget. So that one is the largest, well, sort of the second largest change. The only other one that changed is auto registration tax, the change in that realm. And that's $400,000 negative variance, which previously we projected it would meet budget. But with 10 months under our belt, it just doesn't look like it's going to meet it. So other than that, everything else was, I think there were like 4 or 5 other adjustments that were $100,000, $200,000 plus or minus. Overall, the projected revenue variance, this is a negative revenue variance for general government, is it is now a $2.6 million negative revenue variance. So that's $1.1 million worse than last month. We are very, very deep into this fiscal year, and so there is not much expected to change in any major way, from here on. This actually might be our last monthly report now that we're about to finish the year, which is what we typically do. We basically wait till year-end numbers come together, and then we come back to you like in March, usually late March.
Okay. So late March. Yeah, that's a long, we might be having a lot of conversations about the budget, I think, between now and then. So we might try to ask you for some preliminary numbers a little bit earlier than that, or any revised projections into this for the coming year. I have, let's see. Oh, so 2 questions. Ms. Veneklassen, are you still there?
Jennifer's dropped off and I'm here.
Okay. Desiree, we had a request from Ms. Quinn Davidson. Could you post the agenda? Could we make that a shared screen so we can all follow along?
Yes.
And then we also have Ms. Kennedy in the queue. Ms. Kennedy?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mr. Moore answered my question. I had seen the report saying that we were, last month we were $1.6 million behind in revenues being generated, and now we're 2.6. So anyway, he actually explained it all very well. So I don't really have any additional question there. But I do think, I would kind of appreciate maybe a comment in regard to kind of where you were going to, Mr. Dunbar, was in regard to if anything else kind of starts to come up before we end up in that fourth quarter budget period, that looks like other revenue issues are surfacing, then I kind of would like some updates as well, so that it's not that big surprise in March or April. So if there are things that are trending in that negative direction, I would kind of appreciate a little bit of heads up before we get to that fourth quarter budget period. So just want to kind of echo that thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
You have anything?
Go ahead. Was that Mr. Frisk? I'm sorry, I didn't.
I apologize. Dan and I were just talking and I accidentally hit the button. Basically, for my conversation here with Dan, is that we're probably not going to have any substantial numbers to even preliminarily look at until maybe the first week of February.
Yeah, it really, historically, the numbers don't, like, we're in mid-December. So between now and, after the end of the year, the numbers are not likely to change much at all. The only number that really, really changes every year is what they call deferred revenue for property tax. And that is not determined until the Controller Division does their big entry in the first week of March. And that can be a significant number, either positive or negative, and we have no way of predicting it until they get through a lot of their year-end work.
Okay. Mr. Chair, can I
go ahead?
Thank you. And so I just want to say thank you then, and I'm okay with that answer, and that makes sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question on this. Question here, Dan, on page 3, let's see here, quarterly reported revenue. the room tax here is it's $10.4 million, correct? That's what it states here.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, the 10.4 is if anyone were to look in SAP, that's what you would find for that room tax number, and that's just the general government portion.
So what does that mean the overall collected room tax was for this year? If that's a general government portion, then what's the overall collected portion for this year?
It is like actually collected at this point, it's somewhere around 23 or $24 million. We do, obviously, we're going to get money for the fourth quarter. That'll be due and payable by the end of January. And typically, I think that's like $3.5 million, somewhere in that range. So for the year, we still, and this is for year 2021, I'm not looking far ahead, 2021, we still expect, as we said verbally at the last meeting, $27.5 million for this year.
Okay. I guess I don't quite understand the math here, though. If the room tax, so is the room tax not split evenly then? Is that what's happening? Because if it's 10.4 million and that's a third, obviously it should be, 31 million, but you're saying it's 27.5 million. So is it not quite one third?
Yeah, it's not quite one third. And I think Travis was going to chime in here.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's and it's about 4 or 5 different areas that room tax gets split up on, but historically, and I did double check when I've been running through these numbers all throughout this year, it's around 40% is what is coming back to general government. And so, but there are 3 entities that get it. There's general government, there's the convention center, and there's Visit Anchorage, but it's not an exact 1/3 split amongst those 3 entities.
Okay, great. Interesting. So another one that has generated a lot of interest, and I'm just trying to find where it is exactly, is alcohol tax.
Last page.
Yep, there it is. So we had projected, so I'm looking here. So we had projected 11.8 million in 2021 in our 2021 budget. It looks like here we've collected 11 million so far, but that's only through October. Is that right? So do we have any preliminary numbers on November and December? About how much money we are
This is Dan Moore, Mr. Chair. This is alcohol tax. It's a monthly return, and it's due 30 days after the end of the month. So the most current month we have reported is for October, and we won't know November until the end of this month. I will say that when we last reported a month ago, the month of September was definitely below target. I think it was about 78% of what we thought would come in for September. October was particularly strong. So because of that, we are back on track to get to $1 million positive variance, which is what we had projected 2 months ago. And so if you look at those numbers, they're really easy to divide by. 10 months divided by 11, that's $1 million, about a little over $1 million a month, right? And we have 2 months to go. So we are very likely to get right around $1 million positive variance for this year with a high degree of confidence.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Travis. So, and again, specific to the alcohol tax and the projection, obviously this is brand new territory for the Dan and the previous CFO to try to forecast out what the revenues would be based on an 11-month for a brand new tax. So, right now, again, and I've already commented on this on a couple different occasions, that the alcohol tax will see cyclical ups and downs throughout the entire year. So as you start to build a more historical base of collections, then you can start to fine tune in what that number is going to be and get closer on an annualized basis. But I think they did a great job of estimating approximately a little over $1.1 million per month starting from February through. So the numbers are looking good. Again, the cyclical nature of the alcohol business, we probably need to revisit this, but again, it was for a first year estimate. This is pretty spot on.
Okay. Great. And I apologize, I've been neglecting the queue. Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was back to kind of the timing of our next conversation on some of these numbers. And I'm wondering, I didn't see Mr. Weddleton here, but I know he's been wanting to take up some of the budget issues a little bit sooner. So I am wondering, particularly with regard to the IAFF contract and some other things, if there is a way, I guess I just would like the CFO and the treasurer to weigh in on what kind of information we'll be able to get about revenues. Are we really going to have to wait, until the end of March before we'll have that information to have those conversations? Oh, and I guess Mr. Weddleton is on, so perhaps it's not a concern for him, but it is a concern for me since he's raised it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Weddleton.
I would say it is a concern for me, but I think I've mentioned it in a couple of meetings already. So I assume that they're aware that we really need to look at the budget sooner. And I have a general understanding that the city manager seems to agree, but I suppose we'll see.
Mr. Frisk, do you have any, or Mr. Moore, do you have any response for Ms. Zolotel and Mr. Weddleton?
As far as the budgetary process is concerned, OMB is going to be leading that with the municipal manager. So we can only get you information as quick as we can put it together. So I don't have a definitive answer for you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want to, I think it's important that we have as much information as possible as we take up that issue, and revenue projections are going to be a big part of it. So I just wanted to throw it out as something, at least on my radar, knowing that there's going to be a little bit of lag time and trying to problem solve and make sure we have all of the most up-to-date information we can have. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Moore or Mr. Frisk before we move on from this portion of the agenda? Okay. Desiree, could you put the agenda back up on screen? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Sorry, I got in a little late there. I'm just sort of, I guess, piggybacking on what Ms. Zolotel said. And I just wanted Mr. Moore to confirm when Mr. Dunbar and I and others, I think, were thinking about this too, but when we thought about revenue, we were assuming that 1/3 of the room tax came to general government, and that's how we came to the calculations, the numbers that we did. But are you saying, Dan, that 40% actually comes to general government? Because that would obviously mean there's more available, depending obviously on how much comes in, but more percentage-wise available.
Okay, this is Dan Moore, through the chair. Yeah, the 40% is the net room tax that we in general government receive and can be used for general government purposes. That is after paying expenses of that are related to room tax on collection and enforcement. It's after making sure we pay the required amounts to the convention center. The visit anchorage is a discretionary call, so the assembly can decide year to year whether or not you want to modify that. It may take changing the agreement with visit anchorage, but that is an option. And then in terms of the actual percentage. I think historically, just for ease, it's like described as generally a third. But as I've had to step in here this year more than ever on all these revenues, and because we had a change in treasury and the personnel, so it is for sure. It's right around 40-41% is actually what historically stays with general government, and that's just the way it gets. Allocated out, and OMB is they budget it that way every year. And the only other thing I'll add too is when it comes to revenues and Treasury's role, what we do is twice a year we're asked by OMB to give whatever revenue update or projection we have. That's in early to mid-August. and that is in preparation for the mayor's budget. So this year, our number for the mayor's budget was developed in early to mid-August. And then the other time is in sometime in the month of February, and that is to prepare for the first quarter budget revision. But those are the only two times where we're asked by OMB. OMB then takes that information and they determine, based on everything they need to cover in the budget, kind of how that's going to fit in with their overall proposal to the Assembly.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Dan. Could I ask a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, and then we've got Mr. Gates in the queue.
Oh, okay. So the visit Anchorage amount you said is discretionary, but that is outside of the 40% typically. Not within the 40% we have that we then give some to Visit Anchorage.
Right. Correct. Yeah, that's, I'm talking the general government keeps 40 to 41% for general government purposes, operating budget. The other remainder, the other 59%, is probably essentially an equal split between Visit Anchorage and the convention center.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, since you said something about it being discretionary. That's cool. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Gates, you're in the queue, or you have your hand raised, rather.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to speak to that division of the room tax. And, you know, it's in our municipal code, section 12/2020. And my understanding of the room tax, you know, from historically when I work in the Department of Law and how that's split up, is the reason it comes out to 40% for general government. And I guess Mr. Moore touched on this somewhat. I maybe explained it a different way. But, you know, the general split of the room tax is 1/3 for the convention center, 1/3 for Visit Anchorage, and 1/3 for general government. But that split is only after all the costs of administrative and enforcement related expenses. And so I think when you have those expenses, because those are conducted, enforcement and administration by Treasury, when you have those costs added to Treasury, it's sort of like they're 1/3 plus those costs, or about 40%. And then the 1/3 left over after those administrative costs go to Visit Anchorage and the convention center. And so that's why it looks like skewed. It's not a perfect 1/3, 1/3. It actually is, but only after those costs are considered, and those costs are within general government and the Treasury Division and its labor and enforcement actions and staffing. So, and Mr. Moore can correct me if I explained a little wrong.
That's fine. I think Mr. Gates described it well, and yeah, we're trying to give you a feel for just sort of where it practically ends up. But yeah, it's because of those costs, they do modify the percentage.
Thank you. We have a follow-up now from Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like it is correct to assume sort of a net of a third, or should you look at the revenue amount you have, calculate 40%, and then remove? I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we will, as we're trying to think of 1Q, et cetera, how we will evaluate the revenue.
Sure. Okay, so Ms. Quinn Davidson, so when I look at the revenues and this for room tax, and I look at kind of what it's been doing historically, what it's been doing most recently, and then try to think about what it might do in the future, what I'm looking at is the grand total room tax. That's what I'm looking at in terms of the trend. But then for the general government portion, I'm assuming that ultimately, in terms of what's available to the Assembly, is going to be right around 40% of that grand total number. But when I provide information when Treasury provides information to OMB, what we're doing is we're giving them what we think is the grand total revenue, and then OMB does their allocations from there.
Okay. Ms. Quinn Davidson, do you have another follow-up?
I think I'm still a little confused, but if other members seem to get this, so I won't belabor the point. But I think that 40% is available net to general government. So Dan, correct me, and you can correct me offline if that's wrong.
Ms. Quinn Davidson, this is Travis, and through the chair. What Dan is saying is his projections are not how the actual, it's calculated 100%. Essentially, when room tax comes in, all the administrative costs are taken off the top, and then the net figure is then 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 to the general obligation account and government general obligation, this Denina, and then visit Anchorage. So you clear your administrative costs first, okay, and then the overall is 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. Does that help?
That does help. Yeah, thanks, Travis. And the administration costs are in what sort of range, do you know?
This is Dan Moore. They are in the, I think it's around 400, 500,000 at least. It's to cover all the labor administration costs that we have in Treasury that is specifically tied to room tax. It's in that range. That revenue number is actually in the budget. It falls under Treasury. And I know OMB takes that into account when they do their allocations.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. And thanks especially to Travis and Dan. I appreciate you explaining that.
Great. Well, all right. I think no one else is in the queue, so we'll move on. And Mr. Frisk, you are actually up on the next issue as well. And, you know, we had talk at a prior meeting about setting a monthly work session to talk about Fema reimbursement, because it is such a big deal. And we know it's this huge amount of money that's sitting out there now and causing a lot of our financial issues. But I had suggested to the administration, and we haven't confirmed it yet, but I know that, I think it was Ms. Domboski said that the administration was resistant to having a separate work session every month because of the time constraints, or sort of the staff time. But I'm hoping that instead we could have a, you know, as comprehensive as possible reimbursement talk just here as a standing item at the Budget and Finance Committee. So Travis, if you or one of your delegates could talk a little bit about any progress that's been made in the last month in achieving FEMA reimbursement, I think we'd all love to hear it.
So through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, I'll touch on two subjects here. And I first of all, I'm not going to speak on the work session. Again, that's something that you'll need to discuss with the municipal manager as far as if that's going to happen or not. But what I will talk on is 2 points. One of which is we did receive an additional reimbursement recently in the tune of about $250,000. Actually, we got the notification this morning, so we should actually have the funds in our account tomorrow. With that said, we are in communication with the state on some specific requirements that they have requested of us in order to continue processing our request for reimbursement. And at this point in time, it's a discussion with our expert advisor on FEMA reimbursement that are going to have a discussion. Amanda Loach in the Office of Emergency Management and our advisor are going to discuss with the state on specific parameters of which they're requesting additional information. I'm not going to get into the fine details of that, but right now, if we don't produce the report that the state's asking for, we're not going to get reimbursed, is the way the state has put it. That communication is going to be going on, like I said, between Amanda and our advisor and the state to try to convince them to not require this specific report on every reimbursement request.
Okay, Mr. Weddleton is in the queue. John?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, Mr. Frisk, on that 250,000 that we just got, what % of the request was that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Weddleton, through the chair. Essentially, this is not a COVID reimbursement. I should have clarified that. The reimbursement we're receiving is for a specific project in Eagle River that has just been completed and finalized. So that is what I'm discussing here. We have not, at this particular point in time, received any additional COVID reimbursement from our last meeting, which was a week and a half ago, Friday with Alden. We're still in that same situation we were then. We have not received any additional money. We're trying to work approximately $5 million through the pipeline right now. And I was hopeful that we might get it by the end of the year, but my hope's diminishing on a day-by-day basis, obviously. So I'm thinking that we might see a drop in of $5 million in January from COVID reimbursement.
Well, that would be nice. So that 250,000 related to an earthquake item, I guess, was it 100% reimbursed?
Yes, it was. It was actually yes, 100%. The project was finalized, that we did get the full reimbursement for the expenses. We've had very little pushback in the form of denials as far as expenditures on earthquake. And actually, we've actually had overpayments simply because when they obligate the project at $100,000 and you can complete it at $80,000, you get the full 100. There's a provision that allows for the overpayment on contracts, and I don't hold my feet to this, Mr. Wellston, but I think it's any contract under $165,000. I'd have to go back to Alden and get that exact number, but any contract that's obligated up to a certain amount, and I thought it was $165,000, you get paid the full $165,000 whether you do the project for $50,000 or $170,000.
Oh, well, good work. Thanks.
Yes.
I should have asked this question, but is Alden online, or is he with you, Travis?
He is not here at this particular point in time.
Do you think he could be available next month at this meeting? I mean, I do think that FEMA is going to continue to be one of our top of mind options, and he doesn't have to put together a full report as he did in the past, but I think a brief update from him would be really valuable if he can come.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll loop him in.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday at the Housing and Homelessness Committee, I brought up FEMA reimbursement as related to our mass care facilities. So I just wanted to see if Mr. Frisk, you or your team had any updates, in particular when it comes to FEMA and mass care, as well as any updates on the data cleanup project. As I understand it from a written response from the municipal manager, we're good as of October 1st, but I know that we're cleaning up data prior to that to make sure that we are eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So if you have any update on that project, that would be helpful.
Through the chair, Mr. Rivera, I'm not sure what data the municipal manager may have been referencing, so I can't speak to that. Again, the mass care reimbursement is tied to the reporting requirement that the state is requiring, and that is like I said, that's a discussion between Amanda Loach, the OEM, and our advisor in the state to try to resolve that issue.
Can I just do a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, the data that I'm referring to is AKHMIS. And I'm glad to hear that there are ongoing conversations with the state. If you could provide updates on that as things evolve, because the more that we can get reimbursement at mass care, the better. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the FEMA reimbursement topic? Not seeing anyone in the queue, and haven't got any additional messages about this. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to Ms. Bonzoff and the OMB report on the budget to actuals for 2021. I don't think we have a document posted on this. Ms. Bonzoff, are you here?
I am here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have something you want to put up on the screen, or will it just be verbal today?
I do have something in a draft form that I can put on screen and then also send to for publication.
Yeah,
but it
please
is
send
draft again.
Okay, please send it to Desiree if you would.
Yes, sir. Let's see here. Having some technical difficulties. Okay, can you see me? My screen?
Yes, it's a little bit small. I can't read it,
Okay.
but
Yep.
there are certainly numbers there.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for this opportunity. What I am presenting at this time is the budget to actuals for general government operating. What has already been presented to the Assembly was the budget to actuals for general government through October 21. What I'm showing to you at this time is the October report in narrative that was accepted by the Assembly on December 7th. What we're working on now is the budget to actuals through November for general government. At this time, I don't have this narrative, but what I do for November, but what I do have is the 5 matrices that we show the budget to actuals in different forms for November. But again, it is in draft. What I'll walk through now, if that's okay, is the documents, the numbers. So at this time for November, and those budget to actuals that we present are the narrative that we provide is if the budget to actual trend is 5% over or 5% under our percent through the fiscal year. And when we presented the October budget to actuals through the fiscal year, none of the departments were over 5% through the percent through the year. And in October, it was 83.3%. And now in November, our percent through the fiscal year is 91.5%. And the same thing is happening in November, where that none of the departments are, their percent spend doesn't exceed 5% through the fiscal year as of these draft numbers. The two changes from in probably the featured 5% change of percent through the year are library. In the October report, library was showing at 5% underspent through the fiscal year, where it's now within the 5% range, so it's just trending within 5% spend, and so is planning. So again, the budget to actuals percent spent through November in this draft posting, through the draft numbers we have, none of the departments are over 5% spent. What though we do have is December coming up, and the direct cost processes also are affected by year-end postings that may happen during the closing process that can go through January, February, maybe even a little later. And so this November report will probably be our last direct cost budget to actuals report for a little while, until we get probably a firmer picture of how the December/year end actuals look. Some of the activity that posts in December that may change the percent spent would include leave cash outs, and then also the split payroll and how that's allocated between the fiscal years. And as I said, I think I believe I said it last time, and we're still expecting, although the police department at this time is showing within the 5% range, I think we're expecting that they may come over budget by the end of the year because of a couple factors that they're still trying to manage, but one of them being overtime. So this is the direct cost report through November by department. Our next, are there any questions on that summary, which was rather summary? I didn't go into the details.
I don't see
before I go
anyone.
to the next report.
I don't see anyone in the queue, so I think you can keep going forward.
Thank you. The next report in this presentation of 5 are the split between the labor and non-labor. Again, this is at a point in time through November, just showing that, you know, labor trends. So we show the difference between the labor trends and the non-labor trends. The labor postings are through, the labor postings are based on the pay period postings, not necessarily the month end time frame. So that's why we show a different percent through the fiscal year. This here is numbers. It's a lot of numbers if you're looking on a screen, but the next report that I'll show, if it's okay, is bar graphs that is the same information but presented in a picture form, where some departments may be under in non-labor, they may absorb that with their labor and vice versa. But again, at this time, everybody's within their 5%. If I can go back to and that's the end of the summary of the overall direct cost, non-labor and labor reports.
Okay. Any questions on this or the previous slide? I'm not seeing any. So yeah, you have one more?
2 more.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Thank you. And the next 2 reports are just the summaries of overtime through November and also travel budget to actuals through November.
Are there any highlights in the overtime that you'd like to talk about?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have a question for Ms. Bonzoff? If not, we will move on to the next part of our agenda. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, Ms. Bonzoff. Thank you for your report again.
Thank you.
Okay. Desiree, would you put the agenda back up? All right. Let's see. We don't have any other business that folks have asked about, at least. We don't have anything planned for legislative priorities or budget items for 2023. Would anyone, any of my colleagues, would you like to state anything about either point under number 4 or anyone from the admin? My understanding is that the mayor presented legislative priorities yesterday, and that the primary priority, as it was through much of the Berkowitz administration, was the port and funding for the port. Is there anyone from the administration who might want to comment on that? Okay, well, not hearing anything. Again, if any of my colleagues want to say something, do so now. Otherwise, we'll move on to audience participation, and perhaps we'll end a little early today. Okay. Desiree, do we have a way to allow the audience to participate?
Yes, if people are calling in, they can *6 to unmute themselves and speak.
Okay, so if anyone would like to speak, please use *6 to unmute yourself now. Okay, and the Vice Chair of the Budget Advisory Commission just said that she had to sign off. Yep, I will do that. Ms. Quinn-Davidson asked that I thank Travis, Marilyn, and Dan for their helpful reports. And yeah, I think we're all very thankful. It's very great to have you here. And I think we all always learn a lot. And we'll look forward to doing so again in the new year. So without not hearing anybody trying to participate, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, we are adjourned. And again, we'll see everyone in 2022. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.